The moment I stepped into her dress, my reflection didn't just look different. It looked alive. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, and I could barely recognize myself. Every laugh, every glance, every expectation I'd ever lived up to shattered in that mirror. And in that terrifying, thrilling second, I realized something I could never unsee. This is who I am. I never thought I would stand in front of my bedroom mirror and feel a stranger staring back at me. Yet here I was, fingers trembling as they hovered over the soft fabric of a blouse I had never dared wear in public. The first thought that struck me was shame, sharp and biting, but beneath it was something quieter, more insistent. Curiosity. What would it feel like, I wondered, to see the world through this reflection, to inhabit this version of myself, even for a few fleeting moments? My reflection caught my eyes, wide and searching, and I realized I was holding my breath, as though exhaling might make this fragile fantasy shatter into nothing. I had always hidden behind baggy jeans, oversized hoodies, and a careful indifference to my own appearance, but today something had shifted. Maybe it was the way the morning sunlight streamed through the blinds, or the way my reflection seemed to plead for recognition, but a daring whisper inside me said, "Try it." Tentatively, I lifted the blouse from the hanger. Its fabric was soft, almost like liquid against my skin, and as I slid it over my arms, I felt a shiver of revelation. This wasn't just clothing. It was a bridge to a part of myself I had long ignored, tucked away beneath fear and habit. I caught sight of my hair, long enough to brush against my collarbones, and my hands instinctively smoothed it back. Every strand seemed alive, shifting with the light, a subtle echo of the transformation beginning in my chest. There was fear too, unmistakable and heavy, pressing on my ribs. What would happen if anyone saw me like this? What if I could never go back to the person everyone thought I was? But alongside the fear was an almost sacred thrill, a tremor of excitement that my heart could not contain. My reflection no longer felt like a stranger. It felt like a question, a challenge, a promise. I took a deep breath, letting the tension in my shoulders soften, and whispered under my breath, "I want to see her. I want to meet her." And in that small, tremulous affirmation, the first threads of something profound began to weave themselves through my consciousness, the fragile, exhilarating beginnings of a revelation about who I truly might be. The first few steps felt like walking on glass, fragile, tense, and electrifying all at once. I stared at myself in the mirror, really stared, noticing the subtle curves of my jaw, the softened line of my cheeks, the way my eyes seemed to glimmer with a hesitant light. The blouse swayed slightly as I shifted my weight, and the sensation of fabric against my skin felt impossibly intimate, almost like a secret the world had never been allowed to see. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, loud and insistent, a reminder that this was terrifying and thrilling all at once. I reached for a skirt, folding it carefully, feeling the weight and texture in my hands. It was strange how such a simple act, a garment, a piece of fabric, could feel monumental, like holding a key to a door I had spent years afraid to open. As I stepped into it, the skirt brushing my legs, I felt a tiny pulse of confidence, delicate and fragile, but undeniable. I caught my reflection again, now a little more complete, and for a moment I allowed myself a small smile. Could this really be me? Could I really exist in this way, soft and visible, without fear overwhelming every thought? The mirror, I realized, had become more than just glass. It was a silent witness, a confidant, a portal between the person I had always been and the person I was beginning to discover. I reached out, fingertips grazing the reflective surface, and felt a strange, calming electricity. "I am allowed to exist like this," I whispered, the words almost foreign in my own mouth. And with that whispered affirmation, the fear began to shift. Not vanish, not entirely, but soften, bending around a new possibility. That maybe, just maybe, I could step out of the shadows and meet the world as her. I moved toward the window, letting the morning light spill across the folds of my skirt and the soft curve of my shoulders. The reflection in the glass was clearer here, almost like a promise rather than a challenge, and I found myself tracing the lines of my face with hesitant fingers, marveling at how familiar and foreign it looked all at once. There was fear, yes, raw and insistent, but beneath it was a quiet thrill, like discovering a secret corridor in a house I had lived in all my life yet never explored. My hands lingered over the hem of the skirt, feeling the fabric sway with the faintest movement, and I realized that each step, each gesture, was a rehearsal for something larger. something the world might never understand. The blouse, the skirt, even the soft sway of my hair felt like armor and liberation all at once. I took a deep breath, letting it fill my chest, and felt the tension in my muscles ease just slightly. The reflection no longer frightened me. It invited me to exist fully, to inhabit this space without apology. I glanced down at my feet, bare, still uncertain, and yet I felt a strange courage rising from somewhere deep inside. I wanted to walk, to move, to feel the world acknowledge me, even in the smallest way. The thought of stepping outside made my stomach flutter, a mix of dread and exhilaration. But I knew that if I stayed here, behind closed doors and in mirrors alone, I would never know the truth of her, the self I was beginning to meet. With a shaky inhale, I whispered, "I'm ready." And in that small, trembling confession, I felt the first spark of something profoundly transformative stir within me. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, the sound of my own movements amplified in the quiet of the house. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet felt like an announcement, a tiny proclamation to the world. She exists. My reflection in the hallway mirror caught me mid-step, skirt swaying, blouse soft against my arms, and I couldn't stop the shiver that ran down my spine. There was fear of being judged, of failing, of collapsing under the weight of all the changes. But there was also a pulse of exhilaration, a quiet thrill that whispered, "This is real. You are real." I walked toward the front door slowly, each step deliberate, as if practicing bravery one foot at a time. I paused, hands resting lightly on the doorframe, and studied the reflection in the small glass pane. My eyes seemed brighter, more alive, more willing to meet the world than they had in years. My chest rose and fell unevenly, a rhythm of nervous anticipation, and I realized that this moment, simple, ordinary yet terrifying, was already reshaping me. I was stepping into a version of myself I had only dared imagine in quiet, private thoughts, and the act of simply moving forward felt monumental. With a trembling hand, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The sunlight hit me instantly, warm and unfamiliar, spilling across my shoulders and the fabric of my skirt. I inhaled deeply, savoring the air, the scent of morning, the subtle rustle of leaves outside. And for the first time, I felt a fragile but undeniable pride. I was standing on the threshold between the hidden life I had known and the visible life I was daring to claim. The door swung fully open and I took the first step outside, letting the world witness me, letting the world see her. And in that step, I felt the first quiet surge of freedom. The world outside was brighter, sharper, and somehow larger than I remembered. Each step on the sidewalk felt like a heartbeat, a drum of courage pulsing through my legs and spine. People passed by, their movements ordinary, mundane, but my mind spun with tension. Would they notice? Would they judge? I forced myself to relax my shoulders, let the skirt sway naturally, let my hands rest gently at my sides. The reflection in the shop windows was my constant companion now, catching glimpses of her, the version of me I was slowly learning to inhabit. A breeze lifted strands of hair across my face, and I brushed them back with a nervous laugh, realizing how sensitive I had become to every detail, every sensation. The blouse clung lightly to my arms, the skirt moved with a rhythm that mirrored my heartbeat, and the air felt like a spotlight on the small stage I had created for myself. Fear was still there, a constant whisper at the edges of my awareness, but it no longer dominated me. I could feel pride budding inside, quiet, delicate, and yet fierce in its insistence. As I walked past a small park bench, a child waved at me, smiling innocently, and the simple acknowledgement shattered a tiny wall of doubt I hadn't known I was holding up. A warmth spread through my chest, fragile but powerful, and I allowed myself to meet the wave with a smile of my own. In that fleeting exchange, I realized something profound. The world was not as terrifying as my imagination had painted it. My reflection in a puddle shimmered with the morning light, distorted yet honest, and I whispered under my breath, "I can exist here. I can be her." That single affirmation, repeated to myself like a mantra, carried me forward, step by careful step, into the unfolding revelation of who I truly was. I reached the edge of the small park, the sunlight filtering through bare branches and scattering across the path. Each step felt like a negotiation between fear and curiosity, a careful dance of self-discovery. The dress swayed gently with my movements, the fabric brushing my legs in a way that was both grounding and electrifying. I caught myself in the reflection of a puddle, studying the curve of my jaw, the softened line of my cheeks, the subtle light in my eyes. This version of me felt fragile, yes, but also unmistakably alive. A group of joggers passed by, and I braced myself, expecting stares or whispers, but they barely glanced in my direction. Relief flooded me in a quiet, almost dizzying wave, and I laughed softly, incredulous at how liberating simple invisibility could feel. It wasn't that the world didn't see me. It was that I could see myself, fully and without apology. My hands brushed over the skirt again, tracing the fabric as if to remind myself that this transformation wasn't a dream, wasn't a fleeting whim. It was tangible, real, and mine to claim. I found a bench overlooking the small pond at the park's center and sat down, letting the fabric of the skirt gather naturally around me. The water reflected sunlight and the faint ripple of wind, and I realized that each ripple mirrored the subtle changes in me, the trembling beginnings of courage, the tentative pride, the quiet defiance of old fears. My chest tightened with emotion, a mix of awe, relief, and wonder. For the first time in years, I felt fully present in my own skin. I whispered to myself, I am allowed to be her. I am allowed to exist. And in that moment, the world, the reflection, and I were in fragile, beautiful alignment. I rose from the bench, letting the gentle sway of the skirt guide my steps as I walked along the path that curved around the pond. The reflection in the water followed me, fractured by ripples, yet unmistakably me. Soft, visible, alive. Every movement felt deliberate, each step a quiet declaration that I could exist in this form, in this skin without apology. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves, and somehow it felt cleansing, as if it was washing away years of self-doubt, of hiding, of shrinking. A family strolled past, their chatter and laughter ordinary and comforting, and I realized that the world wasn't holding a magnifying glass to my existence. People moved around me, some glancing, some oblivious, and each interaction, however brief, made me feel smaller fears loosen their grip. My fingers absent-mindedly traced the hem of the skirt, and I caught the way the sunlight caught the fabric's folds, turning it into something almost sacred, a symbol of my quiet bravery. My heart swelled as I allowed myself to feel proud, not loudly, not for anyone else, but quietly, deeply proud of taking these steps. For the first time, I could imagine walking this path regularly, feeling the rhythm of my own confidence grow with each stride. I whispered under my breath, I can do this. I am her. The affirmation felt like a pulse of light inside me, brightening spaces I hadn't realized had been dark for so long. And in that delicate, trembling acknowledgement, I realized that this was more than clothing, more than reflection. It was reclamation, the first fragile embrace of a self I had long denied. I wandered further along the park path, letting my senses drink in the world around me. The rustle of leaves underfoot, the distant laughter of children, even the soft hum of the city beyond the trees. All of it seemed sharper, more vivid, as if my awareness had been tuned to a frequency I had never dared access before. Each step in the skirt and flats was a careful rehearsal in courage, a quiet affirmation that I could move through the world as her, fully and without pretense. My reflection in the occasional puddle caught my attention again, and I found myself studying her. The curves of my face, the gentle sway of my hair, the delicate movement of my hands. I was learning her, this version of myself, and each glance was both revelation and reassurance. A jogger passed, nodding briefly in acknowledgement, and the simple human gesture stirred a warmth inside me I hadn't expected. There was no judgment, no ridicule, only the silent recognition of existence. My chest tightened as a mix of pride and relief flowed through me. I realized then that the journey wasn't just about clothes or appearance. It was about daring to be visible, to inhabit a space that I had long thought forbidden. Each small step I took was a quiet act of defiance, a rebellion against the self-imposed restrictions that had kept me hidden for so long. I paused near a park bench, letting the soft breeze lift strands of my hair, and whispered to myself, I can exist. I can belong. The words tasted strange but true, echoing inside me like a mantra. In that moment I felt the fear begin to loosen, replaced by a fragile, glowing certainty that this identity, this self, was real, and it deserved to breathe, to move, and to meet the world openly. The reflection shimmered in a puddle at my feet, distorted yet truthful, and I knew with a quiet thrill that I was finally stepping into the life I had longed for, one deliberate, trembling step at a time. The path wound deeper into the park, and with each step, I felt a strange mixture of liberation and vulnerability. The skirt swayed softly, my flats made light, measured taps against the gravel, and every movement reminded me that I was visible, unhidden, unguarded, yet somehow whole. The reflection in the pond beside the path caught my gaze, distorted by the ripples of a passing breeze, and I found myself staring longer than I should have, tracing the soft lines of my jaw, the subtle warmth in my cheeks, the glimmer of curiosity in my eyes. A group of children ran past, laughing, and for the first time I didn't shrink away. Instead, I smiled at them, letting the moment pass like a bridge between the past and present. The boy I once was, the shy, cautious version of myself, felt far away now, replaced by someone still learning, still trembling at exposure, but daring to exist in a space I had once denied. I felt the faint pulse of pride rising, fragile but insistent, and I pressed my hands lightly over the fabric of the skirt, reminding myself that this tactile sensation was real. My boss, walking a few paces behind, stayed silent, letting me inhabit this world without interference. Yet the soft encouragement in her presence steadied me, and I realized that what I was doing, simply being, simply existing, was a quiet act of bravery. My reflection in the water shimmered again, fragmented by the slightest ripple, and I whispered under my breath, "I am allowed. I can be seen. I am her." For the first time, the fear and exhilaration existed in harmony, a delicate rhythm that felt like the heartbeat of my new life, unfolding slowly, insistently, and entirely on my own terms. I found myself approaching the center of the park, where sunlight pooled across the grass and the fountain caught the light like a jewel. My steps had grown steadier now, though my heart still fluttered with each glance from passers-by. Each reflection in a shop window, each ripple in the pond, seemed to remind me that I was more than a shadow of someone else. I was fully, undeniably me. The skirt swayed naturally with my movements, the blouse soft and warm against my arms, and for the first time, I felt a quiet thrill in simply inhabiting my body without apology. A couple walking their dog paused briefly, nodding in my direction, and I smiled, feeling the warmth of recognition without judgment. It struck me then how long I had lived in fear of even the smallest acknowledgement, how much I had hidden, how much I had denied myself. My fingers brushed along the hem of the skirt, feeling the fabric as a tether to my courage, to the reality of this transformation. The reflection in the fountain shimmered, broken by the tiniest ripple, yet it was unmistakably me, soft, fragile, and alive. The emotional weight of the moment hit me fully, a surge of pride, relief, and wonder mixing with the familiar twinge of fear. I realized that this journey wasn't about perfection, or about anyone else's approval. It was about daring to see myself, to move through the world visibly and without shame. I whispered under my breath, "I am allowed to exist. I am her." And in that fragile, glowing affirmation, I felt the first quiet, sustaining liberation, the beginning of a self that had long been denied, now taking its tentative but unstoppable place in the world. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting the park in warm golds and ambers, and the world seemed to soften around me. Each step along the winding path felt deliberate, measured, as if I were learning to walk not just in these clothes, but in this self, the self I had long hidden, long denied, yet had quietly yearned to meet. The skirt brushed my legs gently, and the blouse moved softly with my shoulders, reminding me with every movement that this was not borrowed or imagined, it was mine to claim. I paused near a small bridge, watching the reflection of trees ripple in the water below. My own reflection shimmered with the uneven movements, and I felt a deep, aching gratitude for the courage that had brought me here. Fear was still there, a low hum in my chest, but it no longer dictated my actions. Each glance from strangers, each passing acknowledgement, had become a stitch in a fragile tapestry of confidence. I raised my hands and adjusted my hair, noticing the subtle curve of my jaw, the light in my eyes, the way the fabric of the skirt moved naturally with my body. A little girl ran past, waving at me, and I returned the wave with a genuine, unguarded smile. The joy that flickered in that brief exchange lit something inside me, a delicate, growing certainty that I could exist visibly, freely, without shame. My reflection in the puddle beneath the bridge seemed to wink back at me, fragmented yet whole. I whispered softly to myself, "I am here. I am her. I can continue." And in that quiet affirmation, I felt the unsteady but growing pulse of liberation. A fragile, exhilarating embrace of a self I had long denied, now fully emerging into the world. The light was fading now, golden shifting into soft dusk, and I felt a calm settle over me that I hadn't known I could carry. The park, once intimidating and alive with imagined judgment, now felt like a sanctuary. Each step I took in the skirt and flats felt purposeful, measured, a quiet declaration that I could exist, fully and unapologetically, in this body, in this form. The wind tugged gently at my hair, and I let it lift freely, brushing against my face, a simple reminder that I was alive, visible, and present. I stopped at the edge of the fountain one last time, staring at the reflection that had guided me through the day. She was real, soft, tentative, radiant, and undeniably me. I traced the lines of my face lightly with my fingertips, marveling at the journey that had brought me here. The fear, the hesitation, the private explorations, and the trembling courage it took to step outside. I realized then that this transformation wasn't just about clothes, appearances, or fleeting identity. It was about reclaiming a self I had long denied, embracing vulnerability as strength, and daring to meet the world as the person I had always wanted to be. My chest tightened with emotion, a mixture of relief, pride, and awe. I whispered softly to myself, I am her. I can exist. I can continue. The sun dipped fully below the horizon, and the park bathed in the soft glow of evening, and I felt an unshakable sense of completeness, fragile yet undeniable. I had crossed a threshold today, from hiding to being, from fear to acceptance, from hesitation to courage, and I knew with a quiet, certain joy that this was only the beginning of truly meeting myself.